Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
About a week before all this went down, I had just gotten out of the hospital after the worst 2 weeks of my life. It started with this pain behind my knee that came out of nowhere. At first, I thought it was just a cramp, but it got worse every single day until I literally couldn't do anything. I couldn't sit, couldn't stand up straight, couldn't walk, couldn't even lay down comfortably. Bending my leg was torture and straightening it was just as bad. The pain was so intense that I stopped getting up to use the bathroom or eat. I just laid in bed wincing every time I had to move even a little bit. My family was freaking out because this all happened so suddenly. I hadn't fallen or hurt myself in any way that would explain it. When I finally went to the hospital, the doctors were completely baffled. They did a CT scan and an MRI, and that's when they found this massive lump behind my leg. I'm talking football-sized. When they brought in an oncologist, I almost lost it. I was terrified they were going to tell me I had cancer. Turns out the lump was just a fatty tumor, nothing dangerous according to the surgeon. But the real problem was that somehow I had torn tendons and ligaments in my leg, which is what was causing all that pain. The doctors couldn't figure out how it happened since I hadn't injured myself. They said the swelling would go down in a few weeks and my leg should heal naturally without surgery. When I got discharged, they gave me hydrocodone for 3 days because the pain was still pretty bad. But that stuff is strong and addictive, so they only give you a little bit. After that ran out, I've been taking Tylenol since it's the strongest thing you can get without a prescription. I had to use a walker at first, but now I'm down to just a walking cane. I still need it though because there's always a chance I could fall and I'm not taking any risks. The thing is, my leg hurts if I stand still for too long, so I have to keep it either completely still while lying down or keep moving by walking around. Standing in one spot is the worst. Anyway, 2 days ago, I was getting pretty tired of just sitting at home doing leg exercises in bed and waiting for my dad to bring me my pain medication. My dad and I have had kind of a rocky relationship over the years, so I thought it would be nice to spend some time together and also keep my leg moving by going with him to the pharmacy. When we got there, I decided I wanted to grab some snacks while I was at it. I told my dad about my plans so he wouldn't have to follow me around slowly while I shopped. I suggested he could go across the street to the supermarket to get some groceries while I took my time in the pharmacy. He thought that was a good idea, so we split up. I grabbed a basket and slowly made my way around the store picking up my snacks and pain medication. Then I headed to the front counter to check out. That's where I met this entitled jerk and his kid. There was a line at the register, so I put my basket down next to me and held onto my cane. Like I said, standing still really hurts, and after a few minutes my hands started shaking a bit when I struggled to stay upright. This guy behind me in line made some snide comment about me struggling to stand. He told me to quit being a drama queen and that I could wait like everyone else. I turned around and looked at him for a few seconds before telling him in an irritated tone that I had a bad leg and couldn't stand for too long. Then I turned back around, but this absolute piece of work had the nerve to walk over, pick up my basket, and start going through my stuff. I spun around and yelled loud enough for everyone to hear, demanding that he put down my basket immediately. I wanted to make sure other people noticed what was happening. He just coughed and handed the basket to his son, who looked like he was maybe 6 years old and was already carrying their own basket. Then he kept digging through my things, making comments about my snacks. When he got to my pain medication, that's when things got really ugly. He started accusing me of being some sort of junkie, asking what was with all the painkillers and if I was getting high off them. There were only 3 other people in line and they were either staring or trying to mind their own business. I ignored his disgusting accusation and just asked for my basket back. This made him even angrier. He shouted even louder this time, asking if I was hooked on the pills while throwing my stuff back into the basket. I was almost next in line, but my leg was starting to feel stiff, so I moved a little closer and asked once more for my basket back. He shouted that it was fine and I held out my hand to take it from him. But instead of handing it to me like a normal person, He threw it at me. This guy was at least 6 feet tall while I'm only 5'7", and he threw that basket right at chest height like he was shooting a basketball. Basically, he hurled it at my head. I threw my hands up to block it from hitting me in the face. When the basket hit me, I got knocked backwards and started stumbling. The sudden movement sent shooting pain through my bad leg when I tried to catch my balance or grab onto something, anything, to keep from falling. If I had fallen against the counter, I might have been okay since I'd still be standing. But instead, I fell straight down on my butt and then onto my back. The worst part was that the rope from my cane was around my wrist, and with all the momentum, the cane spun back and I landed right on it with my right arm. I can't even describe how much I screamed and cried. The pain was absolutely unbearable. I tried to roll onto my right side, but I could barely move. You have to understand, I can't even sit down normally because of my leg. I have to lean to the right when I sit on the toilet, at the dinner table, even on my soft mattress. Any pressure on my leg is agony and gives me back pain. Landing hard straight down like that was pure hell. The other customers, the cashier, and the store manager all started yelling at this guy while trying to help me up. I told them no, I wanted to stay on the floor because it was better than trying to sit or stand. Then I demanded loudly for someone to call the police and to not let this maniac leave because I was definitely pressing charges. But this entitled piece of garbage doubled down. He started shouting back at everyone, telling them to look at me and claiming I was exaggerating and not really hurt. He pointed to all my pain medication and walked over to my basket to pull out my pills again. He kept yelling that I was probably getting high off the medication and that no one needed that many Tylenol. He called me an addict and said I didn't even need my cane. Then he kicked my cane away from me, even though the strap was still around my wrist. He screamed that it was all fake and just an act. When he was finishing his ridiculous speech, I could hear his voice starting to shake. I think he was finally realizing he was in deep trouble. He grabbed his son's hand, put down their basket, and tried to speed walk out of the store while muttering something about how they didn't need this and would go to another store. But one of the other customers blocked his path, and so did the manager, who was already on the phone with the police dispatcher saying officers were on their way. When he heard that, this coward completely panicked. He bolted for the exit, dragging his poor kid along, and shoved the customer who was blocking him right into the metal detector by the entrance. He stumbled when some woman with a stroller was trying to walk in. She just stood there confused while he danced around trying to get past her. The customer he had shoved got back on his feet, ran up behind him, spun him around, and tackled him to the ground. He kept him pinned there until the cops arrived. A little while later, my dad came back asking what the hell had happened. I explained everything, and so did the other customers and the manager. When the police showed up, everyone gave their statements about what they had witnessed. I pressed charges and they arrested this maniac. They put him in handcuffs and loaded him into the back of the squad car. His son had to stay behind to wait for his aunt to pick him up. The only thing that kid said to me was that he was sorry before we left. The whole thing was absolutely insane. Some people are just unbelievable. This happened about 9 years ago when I was 8 years old. Back then, I was pretty different from who I am now. I was this super social kid who got along with everyone. I had this way of making friends easily, and honestly, I loved being around people. My parents had signed me up for Scouts because they thought it would be good for me to learn outdoor skills and make more friends. Our Scout group met every week at this old log cabin in the woods. Most of the kids there were from my school or neighborhood, so I already knew them pretty well. We'd do all the usual Scout stuff like knot tying, hiking, and learning about nature. The group was pretty tight-knit, and we all got along great. Well, almost all of us. There was this one kid who was just different, not in a good way. He was loud, aggressive, and seemed to think the rules didn't apply to him. He'd pick fights with the smaller kids, make the girls uncomfortable with his weird comments, and basically made every meeting unpleasant for everyone. At first, I thought maybe he had some kind of special needs or something, so I tried being extra nice to him. I figured if I could be his friend, maybe he'd chill out and stop being such a pain to everyone else. The kid wasn't special or misunderstood. He was just a straight-up bully who enjoyed making other people miserable. It took me a few weeks to figure this out, but once I did, I started getting fed up with his behavior just like everyone else. The breaking point came during one of our regular meetings. I can't remember exactly what he did that day, but it was probably his usual routine of either picking on the younger kids or bothering the girls in our group. Something about the way he was acting just made me snap. I had enough of watching him make everyone else miserable while the adults tried to handle him with kid gloves. I walked right up to him and let him have it. I yelled at him about his behavior and told him exactly what I thought about how he was ruining things for everyone. I expected him to either start crying or try to fight me like he usually did with other kids, but instead something weird happened. He just stopped whatever he was doing and went completely quiet. For the rest of that meeting, he sat in the back corner of our cabin and just stared at me. Not in a sad way or an angry way, but in this creepy, calculating way that made my skin crawl. It was like he was planning something and I was going to be the target. The next week came around, and everything seemed normal at first. We were doing some kind of craft project that required a lot of concentration, so everyone was focused on their work. Everyone except him, of course. Instead of participating, he decided to run around the cabin like a maniac. Our troop leader was doing her best to get him to calm down and sit with the rest of us, but that just seemed to make him more hyper. He was practically bouncing off the walls, making noise and disrupting everyone's work. That's when he noticed the door to the smaller log cabin that was attached to our main meeting room. I was sitting pretty close to that side cabin, so I could hear everything that happened next. He went inside and at first it was quiet. Then I heard him make some kind of excited noise like he had found something interesting. He started whispering for me to come over, calling my name repeatedly. At first I ignored him. I figured whatever he was up to, I didn't want any part of it. But he kept calling for me and honestly, my curiosity got the better of me. What could he possibly have found in there that was so interesting? So like the dumb kid I was, I got up and went to see what he wanted. When I asked him what was going on, he told me he had something to show me. I found him at the back of the small cabin with his back turned to me. Part of me was actually hoping that maybe he wanted to apologize for being such a jerk to everyone. I was already imagining how I'd tell my friends about it later. I asked him what he had there, calling him buddy and trying to be friendly. He turned around slowly and I could see this twisted grin on his face. He asked me if I could see what he was holding, but I couldn't make out what it was in his hand. I told him I couldn't see it and asked if he could bring it closer. He said sure in this creepy, excited way, and that's when I saw it. A knife with a dull red handle, and he was holding it like he knew exactly how to use it. He asked me again if I could see it now, with this sick smile on his face. I think I said something like, "Oh no," or "what the heck," and then I ran. I could hear him laughing behind me like some kind of maniac when I bolted out of that cabin. I ran straight into the main cabin and tripped over my own feet, landing hard on the floor. This got our leader's attention real quick. She looked around and noticed that the problem kid was missing, and I was on the ground looking terrified. She asked me what was wrong and where he was. I told her that he had a knife and was trying to hurt me. She asked me what I meant, and I explained that he was trying to gut me with it. It took her a second to process what I was saying, but once it clicked, she was furious. She stormed into the side cabin while my friends gathered around me, asking what happened. Before I could explain, we all heard her screaming at him. She was yelling about how he had no right to threaten someone with a knife. He tried to defend himself by saying he was just showing it to me, but she wasn't having any of it. She told him he had no business holding a knife without supervision and that he could have hurt himself or me. When he tried to make more excuses, she cut him off and told him to get outside and wait for his mom to pick him up. She came back into the main cabin and told one of the other adults to watch us while she went outside with him to wait for his mother. According to what I heard later, his mom was just like him. She actually tried to tell our leader that I was probably the one who started trouble and that I was the problem. At the time, my friends and I just laughed about it. If I'd known she was planning to come after me the next week, I wouldn't have been laughing. The following week, me and my friends were hanging out on this wooden bridge structure in front of our meeting cabin. We were just messing around, playing tag, doing the usual kid stuff, when this car pulled up. This woman got out, and I could see the problem kid in the back seat crying his eyes out. She demanded to know which one of us had bullied her son. I told her it was me, and she immediately started yelling at me, calling me the one who had bullied her darling child. I was confused and asked her what she meant. When I realized she was his mom, I explained that her son had tried to slice me with a knife. She refused to believe me, insisting that he would never do such a thing. Then she went off on this ridiculous rant about how wonderful her son was. Every word that came out of her mouth was complete nonsense. She claimed he was a gentleman, even though he spent half his time harassing the girls in our group. She said he was great at school even though he couldn't pay attention for more than 30 seconds and later turned out to be a terrible student in high school. She bragged that he had more friends than any of us, even though he had managed to turn everyone in our scout group against him. I got bored listening to her lies and went back to playing with my friends. Some of them kept arguing with her while others just ignored her completely. But my friend, this girl I'd known since kindergarten, started absolutely roasting this grown woman. I can't remember exactly what she said, but it must have been good because Karen completely lost it. She told my friend to shut up and called her a nasty name, saying it wasn't any of her business. That just made my friend even angrier, and she really let the woman have it. Knowing her mom, this didn't surprise me at all. My friend came from a family that didn't take crap from anyone. The argument was getting pretty heated when one of our leaders noticed what was going on and started walking over to see what the commotion was about. When Karen saw the adult approaching, she jumped back in her car and took off like a coward. When the leader asked us what happened, we told him everything. He went straight to our main troop leader, and she was absolutely furious. She immediately banned the problem kid from our scout group permanently. That ban lasted for 3 whole years until 2016, when he tried to come back. By then, I had quit Scouts in 2011, so I didn't think it would affect me. But wouldn't you know it, I decided to give Scouts another try in the fall of 2016. And guess who was there waiting for me? The same jerk, now older but apparently no smarter. I work at this local gas station making pizzas, heating up hot dogs, restocking the shelves with frozen junk. The job itself isn't bad, but my boss tries to find reasons to write people up over the smallest stuff. I guess he thinks it makes him look like a tough manager or something. I've had a few run-ins with him before where he tried to pull some power trip nonsense, and each time I found a way to turn it back on him. You'd think he would have learned by now, but apparently not. This latest incident really takes the cake though. It all started on a Thursday morning. I was rushing to get the kids ready for school and myself ready for work when I missed a step going down my stairs. I went tumbling down hard and landed right on my side. The pain in my ribs was immediate and intense. I could barely breathe for a few minutes. I checked the time and realized I had less than 2 hours before my shift started. I tried calling around to see if anyone could cover for me, but nobody was available on such short notice. I didn't want to leave my co-workers hanging, especially since we were already short-staffed that week. So I dragged myself to work, moving like an old woman. I was about 9 minutes late clocking in because every step hurt like hell. When I saw my boss, I explained what happened and apologized for being late. I told him about falling down my stairs that morning and how badly my ribs were hurt. I explained that I had tried to find someone to cover my shift but couldn't reach anyone on such short notice. His response was completely cold. He brushed off my explanation and said I was still late regardless of what happened. He reminded me about the company policy on punctuality like I was some chronic problem employee. When I tried to explain again that this was a genuine emergency and that I had literally fallen down the stairs less than 2 hours ago, he just shrugged and said everyone has excuses. He told me to make sure it didn't happen again. I was stunned. No concern for my well-being, no acknowledgement that I came in despite being injured. Just attitude about being 9 minutes late due to a legitimate accident. The next day, Friday, I was 6 minutes late because the registers were all being used when I got there and couldn't clock in right away. I had to wait for someone to finish their transaction before I could punch my time card. I apologized for being a few minutes late and explained that the registers were all tied up when I arrived. He dismissed my explanation completely and said that was no excuse. He told me I should plan better, like I could somehow predict when customers would be using the registers. Then I had to leave after 4 hours for a doctor's appointment. It was the only slot I could get before the weekend, and I work weekends too. I reminded him that I had to leave for my doctor's appointment and that I had told him about it the day before. He complained that it was really inconvenient and that I was leaving them short-handed. When I explained that it was about my full and this was the only appointment I could get before the weekend, he just waved me off dismissively and told me to go. The doctor took one look at me and shook his head. My ribs were badly bruised and I was moving all wrong. To compensate for the pain, he gave me some pain medication and wanted to write me a work note for the weekend and Monday. The doctor told me I needed to rest and that these ribs weren't going to heal if I kept aggravating them. He said he was writing me off work through Monday. I begged him not to write the note, explaining that it was Mother's Day weekend and I didn't want to screw over my team. I told him my boss was already annoyed with me and I couldn't afford to make things worse. He insisted this was medical advice and that I was genuinely injured. But I kept refusing, saying I appreciated his concern but couldn't leave my co-workers hanging. I asked him to just give me the pain medication and promised I'd be fine. Well, those pain meds knocked me out harder than I expected. After I got the kids off to school on Saturday morning, I fell asleep on the couch. I woke up 5 minutes before I was supposed to be at work. I immediately texted both my manager and the kitchen person who was working, explaining that I was running late due to the medication from the doctor, but promising I would be there before 11 when the kitchen person's shift ended. I made it there in time, but I could tell everyone was annoyed, even though I had given them a heads up and hadn't left anyone stranded. Monday morning, my boss called me into his little office area. He told me we needed to talk and announced he was writing me up for excessive tardiness and leaving early. I asked if he was serious, reminding him that I had fallen down the stairs and was injured. I told him I had explained exactly what happened each time. He replied coldly that company policy was company policy and pointed out that I had been late 3 times and left early once. He called it a pattern of behavior. I asked him how he could call it a pattern of behavior when I had a medical emergency. He said everyone has personal problems, but that doesn't mean work policies don't apply to me. I reminded him that I had come in injured because I didn't want to let the team down, and that I could have taken a doctor's note but chose not to. He just said I should have thought about that before being late. He handed me the write-up form to sign. I was furious but signed it anyway because I needed the job. When I walked away, I realized just how stupid I had been. Here I was, trying to be the good employee, working through an injury and getting punished for it anyway. That's when I decided to go back to the doctor. Tuesday morning I finished my 2-hour shift putting away the frozen deliveries. Every box I lifted sent pain shooting through my ribs, but I gritted my teeth and got through it. Then I drove straight to the doctor's office. I told the doctor I needed to share something with him. I explained that I had gotten written up at work for being late the day I got injured, and maybe I should have taken that note he had offered. The doctor was absolutely shocked. He asked if they had written me up for being late when I had a documented injury. I asked him about that work note again, wondering if he could make it a bit longer this time, maybe until the following Monday. He immediately agreed and said frankly, I wasn't healing properly because I had been working. He warned me that if I didn't take this note, he was calling my boss himself. I assured him I was definitely taking it this time. I drove straight from the doctor's office to work and walked into my boss's office with the biggest smile on my face. I greeted my boss cheerfully and told him I had something for him. He asked what it was now, already sounding irritated. I started explaining how I had fallen down my steps the previous Thursday, and when I went to the doctor on Friday, he had actually tried to give me a work note. I told my boss how I had refused the note because I didn't want to leave my team high and dry, especially with Mother's Day weekend coming up. He asked where I was going with this, clearly getting impatient. I continued explaining that when I went back to the doctor that day, I told him I should have taken that original note because I got written up for my tardiness due to my injury. I shared how the doctor said I wasn't healing very fast due to working, and if I didn't take this new note, he was bringing it to my boss himself. Then I handed him the doctor's note excusing me from work for a full week. My boss stared at the note in disbelief, saying I couldn't be serious about taking a whole week off. I explained that these were doctor's orders and that I wanted to give him the note right away since I wouldn't be back in town for a while. I mentioned I would bring the physical copy when I returned home. He protested that this was completely unreasonable and that I couldn't just disappear for a week. I pointed out that actually I could because it was a legitimate medical excuse. I reminded him it was for the same medical issue he had written me up for. He insisted the write-up was justified because I was late. I agreed that yes, I was late because I was injured, the same injury this note was addressing. I told him it was funny how that worked out. He realized he had backed himself into a corner. If he tried to fight the medical note, he'd have to explain why he wrote up an injured employee. If he accepted it, he'd have to deal with being short-staffed for a week right after giving me grief about leaving early for medical appointments. He finally gave in and said fine, but insisted this better be the last time. I assured him not to worry, explaining that I was learning to take better care of myself. I suggested that maybe next time I would just take the doctor's note right away instead of trying to be helpful. When I walked out, I heard him talking under his breath about difficult employees. I smiled. This was the third time he had tried to mess with me over petty stuff, and the third time it had backfired on him spectacularly. I spent that week actually resting and healing like I should have from the beginning. My ribs finally started feeling better, and I came back to work refreshed and pain-free. When I returned, my boss barely made eye contact with me. I think he finally realized that his little power trips weren't working out the way he planned. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.